Hey everybody! So today we're going to talk about the Arabic parts, the lots. You probably have seen this mentioned in lots of different names. I kind of use them all interchangeably, so that's why I throw them all out there. There are probably other ones that people use too. But specifically, there are a lot of them. There are a lot of Arabic parts you can pull. There are a lot of them. I'm going to be talking specifically about the part of fortune, or the POF. You'll see it written as that. I'm also going to talk a little bit about the part of spirit. Now, I want to talk about these because I realized that I have not made a video about these. And somebody recently asked a question about what it might mean if the part of fortune was conjunct their GC. Those are really that's something I really haven't explored that much. That particular any of the the part of fortune, part of spirit, conjunct the GC. I haven't really looked at this, but I was thinking, this is something that I probably should look at. So I was thinking about it, and I thought, well, fuck, I haven't even made a video about the part of fortune or the part of spirit on their own. So I should do that before I start talking about it in relation to the GC. Now, what I'm about to talk about with the part of fortune and with the part of spirit, I realize that there are people that do it differently than I do, that work with this differently than I do. That's fine. I am not saying what I do is correct for me. If you want to do it differently, if you'd rather take a more traditional approach to it, by all means, have at it. I don't think that's wrong. But this is how I work with them. When I work with them, this is what I do. And since you're watching a video that I'm making, it makes sense that I would talk about how I do it. But anyway, let's start with the part of fortune. And you want to, okay, let's start out actually first with calculating them. The part of fortune and the part of spirit. Part of fortune specifically. So when computer software first came out, there were issues with people with night charts. And when they would calculate the part of fortune in their chart, it would actually be calculating the part of spirit for them instead. So since this was an issue, I don't think it's so much an issue anymore, but since it was an issue at one time, I think it's a good idea to learn how to do these by hand, to be able to check what's coming back to you. And plus there are so many parts and lots that you can't just pull anyway. This is something that you do need to learn how to do by hand. If you want to work with them, you do need to learn how to do them by hand. So I'll show you what I did here. Okay. So the part of, and it also depends on what kind of chart you have as to what formula you will use. And you can figure that out by looking at your own chart. See, my sun is in the 12th house. I have a day chart. Anybody that has their sun above the horizon or above the ascendant in houses 7 through 12 will have a day chart. If your sun is below the horizon in houses 1 through 6, you have a night chart. This is important to know for calculating the parts, because the formulas will be a little different depending on what kind of chart you're looking at or what kind of chart you have. Like, for instance, since I have a day chart, the part of fortune formula for me, or for a day chart, is the ascendant plus the moon minus the sun. In a night chart, it would be the ascendant plus the sun minus the moon. So it is important that you know what kind of chart you actually are looking at to know which formula to use. Now, when you do the calculations, you want to change the degrees of the planets that you're looking at, or the ascendant, to the 360 degree zodiac. Like, for instance, and I think you can round, right? Like, for instance, my ascendant's at 15 degrees, 59 minutes of Sagittarius. I rounded it to 16, because why the fuck not? Whereas my moon is at 16 degrees, 3 minutes of Capricorn. I kept that at 16 degrees. My sun is at 1 degree 45 minutes Sagittarius. I did round it to 2. I'm usually not one to round, but when you're doing this, it does make it easier to round. It does. I mean, it might not be exactly precise, but you're getting very close. And yeah, it makes it easier to do this. But if you want to be real precise, you can always add in the minutes too. I don't see any reason why you can't do that. Anyway, so you turn the degrees of the different things that I mentioned to the 360 degree, which is like, 0 to 30 degrees are planets in Aries. 30 degrees to 60 degrees are planets in Taurus, that kind of thing. And I'll link a picture of what I'm talking about, exactly the table for that. But in the case of like my chart, my ascendant is at like 16 degrees Sagittarius, so you turn that to 256. The moon is at 16 degrees Capricorn, so you turn that to 286. That gives you 542. Then you subtract that sun. The sun is 242. When you do that, you get 300. 300 is equal to 0 degrees Aquarius. That's where the part of fortune is in my chart. And that is where it comes back as being on astro.com. As you can see, it's right there in the second house at 0 degrees Aquarius. But I think it's good to check your work with this kind of stuff. And if my thing was, if I had a night chart, it would be 256. It would be the ascendant minus the sun, and then it'd be plus the moon. So it would look something like that. I'm not going to work it out because that's not actually what's going on with my chart, but you get the idea. And that is how you do these calculations. Okay, so I wanted to go into that because that does matter. Definitely make sure you're looking at the right, make sure you know what kind of chart you're looking at so you know exactly which formula to go with. So what is the part of fortune? Okay, well, the part of fortune, it's thought of, and this really does depend on if you are more of a traditionalist or if you practice more ancient astrology, or if you practice more modern astrology, depending on what schools of thought or school of thought you tend to like. This might be read a little bit differently. But essentially it's thought of as a place where prosperity can be found, a place where latent talents are, things that are fortunate for the person. Now, I want to be careful when I say that because that's not always the case. Sometimes a part of fortune is more fortunate for some people than for others. It really does depend on what the planetary ruler or rulers of the part of fortune are doing. And I say that, I know some people are, when it comes to stuff like this, they'll be like, oh, only use traditional rulership. I would use both. So like in my case, I have the part of fortune, it's in Aquarius. I would be looking at both Saturn and Uranus. Since Saturn traditionally rules Aquarius, Uranus is the modern ruler. I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at both. But you want to look at that. You definitely want to look at what the planetary ruler or rulers are doing with the part of fortune to kind of read it alongside. Because if the planetary rulers have some issues, by aspects made or by falling in fall or, or something like that, might make the part of fortune not function quite as fortunately. That's the thought. It's still, I think, kind of is a fortunate place regardless, but depending on what is going on with the part of fortune and the planetary rulers, it does kind of play into just how fortunate it actually is. Also, the part of fortune is also like an indicator of the physical body and how the person lives in the real world. It can be indicative of health. It can, and like how they live in their environment. It's similar to the ascendant in that way, the physical body thing. It is similar to the ascendant. And it's even similar to the ascendant in the case that, or in the sense that the part of fortune is like the ascendant for the Fortuna house system, which is where essentially you slip the chart. Like, let me show you what I mean. Like, okay, the ascendant is the cusp of the first house in a Placidus chart. So essentially in this case, if I were to work with the Fortuna house system, or think of it like that, that would turn my second house to the first. So it's slipping the chart. So essentially that would make my 10th house would become where the 11th house is. That kind of thing. That's kind of how you, I don't really know if they use the term slip the chart here, but that's the term that I would use. But yeah, it just kind of changes things. It kind of changes things around. I'm actually not sure you can actually create this as a house system, but it's another way to look at things. So if you were to do that, and I mentioned that because something that you can look at here as far as like career, say. Career is another, is something that people do because careers tend to bring people prosperity, right? So when you're looking at the part of fortune, if you look at then the sign, you can look at sign and house. I think actually sign is more important here though. So like my part of fortune is in Aquarius. 10 away from Aquarius would be the 11th house and in Scorpio by sign. So that would be like, that's like a career per the Fortuna house system. That would be a career area for me, or it would kind of take on a 10th house feel, if you will, or yeah, it kind of takes on that sort of feel. So this is another place this is another way that you can look at things as far as career goes. I don't always do this, but I think it is a cool concept, and I have done it, but it's not something that I always do. But as far as I know, actually, the more important thing is the sign. That's how I've always understood it. So like more important than, and I bring that up because depending on what house system you use, right? Like if you use whole signs, it's nice and clean like that. If you don't, then you have something where something else is on the cusp, but something else might enter the sign. Like I have in the 11th house, I have Libra is actually on the house cusp, but Scorpio is what I'm looking at here, because Scorpio is 10 away from Aquarius. So yeah, so you'd be looking here at a Scorpio would be more of what I would be focusing on, but the 11th house too, since the 11th house kind of turns into the 10th if you slip the chart. Does that make sense? Hope that makes sense. But this is definitely something that you can look at for things like career. Another thing you can look at, another thing that people like to look at with the part of fortune and with the Fortuna house system is the 11th house, essentially slipping the chart again. So in my case, as an example, if you were to slip the chart, that would turn like the 12th house and Sagittarius. I mean, Scorpio's on the cusp of the 12th, but it would turn it by sign. Sagittarius would be that many away from Aquarius. So that would make that stuff in the 12th and in the 12th in Sagittarius. That's like when you do this, looking at it like slipping the chart to the 11th house, that's like where you acquire things, and accolades and things like that, and even like long-term goals. All of those kinds of things can be tied in or thought of that way if you're looking at the house, if you're using the Fortuna house system, if you're looking at it from this angle. So it's another place that you can look for long-term goals, acquiring things. Let me see if I'm missing anything. Yeah, the acquisition of things. So yeah, I think I'll probably have to do the part of spirit in another video because this one got kind of long. But definitely play around with it. See if any of that fits for you. If it makes sense. If it doesn't, hopefully the idea of slipping the chart makes sense. I hope I explained that well. If not, let me know and I will try again in another video. But anyway, definitely take into account though, don't leave out the planetary ruler of the part of fortune. Don't leave that out. I do notice that people do that, and that probably shouldn't be left out. Just because that'll give you an idea of just how fortunate the part of fortune actually is for the person. Fortunate it is for the person. But anyway, I'm gonna get going. If you want to follow us on Instagram, you can find us at Let's Fuck With Astrology. I am at Saturn Season Astrology on Instagram. Natalie is at Paternal Astrology on Instagram. If you want to like or subscribe or whatever the fuck people do with videos on YouTube, you can find us by searching for Let's Fuck With Astrology in the YouTube search bar. If you do the Reddit thing, come join us on the subreddit Let's Fuck With Astrology. And if you're interested in the star cards, which I didn't show this time, you can go to letsfuckwithastrology.com/star-cards. Okay, y'all. I'll see y'all later.